Dramatic, all-encompassing and game-changing are just three of the words you won't hear me saying about the new Audi Q8. And yes, before any of you complain in the comments, this is the new Audi Q8. But you could be forgiven for not knowing that, because the changes are minor. There's new headlights, there's a new front bumper, and there's some new lights at the back. But that's about it. Yes, you can have one of three new paint colours. There's a blue, red, and well, what I can only describe as a kind of baby food brown, which I wouldn't go for. And there's some new alloy wheel designs in a choice of 21, 22 or 23 inches. Other than that though, it's much the same as before. That probably won't bother most customers. This thing is relatively good looking. I'm not sold on the front end, never have been, but it's not the worst looking product in Audi's range. Inside, the differences are equally minor, and there's absolutely no difference to the engines or to the chassis. So what was the point? Is this new Q8 really worth the money? Or is it getting a bit old compared with more advanced rivals? If you thought the changes to the exterior were minor, you ain't seen nothing yet. In here, absolutely nothing has changed, apart from some flash new interior trim. You've got a choice of wood, this, can't believe it's not aluminium, and a kind of carbon fibre matte weave. To be honest, I haven't been massively impressed by any of them, but I probably would go for the wood were it my decision. Aside from that though, it's much the same as it was before. That's not a great problem. The piano black gets a bit grubby when you get some children's fingerprints on it, but actually in here it's beautifully built. Most of the materials are fantastic. It's really, really solid. The touchscreen could probably do with a little bit of work. I mean, it's a bit sluggish at times and it's got this strange haptic feedback, so you kind of have to really push it rather than just tapping at it like you normally would. But that's a minor problem in the great scheme of things. Special mention should also go to the digital instrument display, which isn't especially new. Audi's virtual cockpit's been with us for years now, but it's still the best in its class. Nothing has come close to beating it. It's got loads of configuration options. You can choose whether you want big dials, small dials, sat-nav, media displays, and it all comes up on this really sharp, clear screen. It's great. Haven't yet come across anything better than that. Space is a strong suit too. The Q8's rear seats are really, really impressive, considering this is supposed to be a slightly more sort of coupe version of the Q7. There's plenty of leg room, plenty of headroom. Even if you're my height, well over 6 foot, it's absolutely fine. And that's me sitting behind my own driving position. Boot space is really good too. It's got more than enough room that anybody will ever need. There's really no great reason to upgrade for a Q7 unless you really desperately want 7 seats. To be honest though, the back row of seats in a Q7 isn't all that useful. It's probably at its best as a 5-seater, and the same goes for this. Except this is a little bit easier on the eye. So far then, so good. And then we come to the driving experience, which definitely hasn't changed. Even Audi's bigwigs admit that it's actually much the same car mechanically as before. The engines are the same, the transmission's the same, the chassis is the same, the suspension's the same. The only real difference is that in a year or so's time they're going to bring in some plug-in hybrid options, but we'll have to wait and see what those look like. For now then, your choice is 3 litre petrol, 3 litre diesel, or a 4 litre V8 in the SQ8. An RSQ8 will probably follow as well. To be honest, the V8 is the most sort of viscerally appealing of the three, but actually this diesel I've got here is more than good enough for any sort of requirement you might have. It's a little bit gruff when it's cold, but actually Generally speaking, it's very smooth, very quiet, and it's got plenty of punch. Once the gearbox sorts itself out, it really does get shifting. And it doesn't sound bad either. A 6-cylinder engine, it's brilliant, and it's more than quick enough. It really is. Naturally, that's linked to Audi's Quattro 4-wheel drive system, which means if you go and do some fairly light off-roading, it'll cope quite happily. A bit of snow won't be a problem as long as you fit some decent tyres, preferably all seasons or winters. And muddy car parks, rugby clubs, whatever, it won't have a problem. Obviously, it's not a Toyota Land Cruiser, and the sort of weight and sportiness of the whole package will cause a few problems if you want to do proper off-roading. Considering the capability of this car though, it does handle rather well. Yes, it's not as good as a Porsche Cayenne or a Lamborghini Urus, but then what is? This thing sits on the same platform as those cars, and it's designed to be that bit softer and a bit less aggressive. But actually, once you start chucking it into corners, it doesn't mind at all. It's no sports car, but it's more than stable enough, and it has this nice sort of reassuring chunkiness to it. Unfortunately, the trade-off is a bit of chunkiness to the ride. This car's riding on the sort of mid-range 22-inch alloy wheels. You can get the 23s on the SQ8, but I wouldn't, because I'm currently doing 59 kilometers an hour, and this road isn't especially challenging, but there's still this underlying bubble and sort of fizz to the suspension that it never quite settles down, and there's a little sort of jiggle through your backside. I was just hoping for more, and this isn't in sport mode, we're in the kind of automatic, everyday, normal setting. Put it in comfort and it slackens off a little bit, makes it a tiny bit more pliant, but you lose a little bit of that body control. Put it into sport mode and it gets a bit stiffer, you get a bit more body control, but the ride comfort completely goes to pot. Might be better on the 21-inch alloy wheels, we haven't had a chance to try that yet, but it's just not quite as comfortable as we were hoping. And we're riding over some corrugations now, and it's not brilliant. It does settle down a bit when you get up to speed. On the motorway, it's not a problem whatsoever. And actually, this is a really, really relaxing long-distance car, particularly with this big diesel engine, which gives you at least sensible fuel economy and ample performance. Around town, where a lot of these cars are going to spend a lot of their time, it is a bit jiggly and unyielding, which, I don't know, a Porsche Cayenne somehow, despite all its handling brilliance, just has that little bit more suppleness to it. Like I say, it's not a disaster, but the fact of the matter is the standard is so high among big luxury SUVs that the Q8 being good just isn't quite good enough. So the Q8 hasn't really changed very much, if truth be told, but then did it really need to? It was never a class leader, but it's good, and if you lived with one, you'd be very, very happy with it. It would slot into your life very nicely indeed. And the fact that, yes, a Porsche Cayenne's better won't really matter to people who either love the Audi brand or love the Q8 styling. I can't say personally that I'm a massive fan of this design. I think it looks a bit too Iron Man for my liking, but if you dig it, you're going to dig it. the fact of the matter is, the Q8 remains a contender, but not a class leader. In truth, the new Audi Q8 isn't all that different from its predecessor, but that's not likely to bother the kind of people who'll buy this thing. Yes, it doesn't lead the class in any particular way, but it's noticeably short of weaknesses. And though I'd have a Porsche Cayenne every day of the week, this is still going to tick a lot of boxes for a lot of customers.